The screams had a rhythm, a chilling cadence of torment pulled from the deepest rock. They echoed across the desolate canyons, sounds that were never just sounds. They were invitations to madness, and for the man known only as the Rider, they were a summons. He rode towards mine number 13, not for gold, but for what writhed in its darkness, twisting human terror into a horrifying song. He was a whisper against the coming storm, a shadow against the dying light, a grim reaper for the unnatural destined to face horrors that scarred the very soul, because no one else could or would. The mining territory was a gaunt, skeletal stretch of land, bleached bone-white by the sun, where jagged rock formations clawed at a relentless sky. A handful of ramshackle shacks clung to the canyon walls, a nameless settlement whose inhabitants were fewer than the shadows they cast. Their faces, when glimpsed, were hollowed by fear, their eyes constantly drifting towards a black gash in the nearby hillside, the entrance to mine number 13. It was said the mine had gone dry a decade past. The veins played out, the ore carts ceased their groaning ascent, and the men, or what was left of them, scattered like dust. But a year after the last man walked away, the sounds began. Not the familiar groans of settling earth, nor the distant creak of collapsing timbers. These were different. They were the sounds of men, and then screams. The rider stepped from his saddle, his movements precise, a lean figure against the vast indifferent sky. The heavy leather of his duster absorbed the harsh light, making him a deeper shadow in the already lengthening afternoon. His face, glimpsed beneath the wide brim of his hat, was a map of old wounds and unyielding resolve. His eyes, the color of storm clouds, had seen too much. He led his horse towards the mine's yawning maw. The air grew heavy and cold as they approached, thick with a palpable dread. The low, insistent moaning that carried on the wind vibrated in the air, a deep thrum that seemed to sink into the marrow of bone. It was a sound that spoke of endless suffering, a constant, mournful drone. He found a lone figure huddled by a meager fire at the edge of the settlement, a man named Silas, his face a web of sun-scorched wrinkles. Silas clung to the edge of sanity like a burr to a threadbare blanket, his gaze fixed on the mine's dark mouth. He trembled, not from cold, but from a profound terror. The rider perceived the story in the old man's desperate eyes, the fear that had been gnawing at this place. The sounds Silas's posture conveyed had started quietly, just groans, like the earth was sick. Then men's voices, calling out, begging. Now they were no longer just calls, they were theirs. The rider felt the implication of a brother's laugh, a wife's song, all twisted and mocking. Silas had even heard something new the previous night, a whisper. Not a scream. It sounded like a promise, an insidious offering. But Silas, though terrified, had not been foolish enough to take it. He knew something was down there. Something learning. Something that fed on more than just the flesh. It had been calling folks, one by one. They walked in like sheep to slaughter. The rider nodded, a grim understanding dawning. This was his work. Things that learned. Things that fed on fear and sanity. He would not be heard coming out. He left Silas by the fire, a figure shrinking against the vast, indifferent landscape, and walked towards the black maw of mine number 13. The air grew colder, thick with dust and a damp, earthy smell. The claustrophobia was immediate, the oppressive weight of tons of rock above and around him. His lantern cut a meager circle of light. He moved slowly, his boots crunching on loose ore, his hand never far from the worn revolver at his hip. He was listening, not just with his ears, but with every fiber of his being, trying to discern the true from the false. Deeper into the earth's throat he went. The low, guttural moaning was a constant companion now, reverberating off the rock walls, a sound like tortured earth and dying breath. Then, faint at first, it began, a sound, a child's whimper. The rider froze. His mind raced, calculating. This was the mimicry. He forced himself to breathe slowly, deeply. The whimper grew louder, closer, echoing eerily. It was a sound designed to tear at the soul, an innocent cry of distress. But the rider knew better. He had faced illusions of despair before. He moved on, the darkness pressing in, the air growing stale and thin. The whimper changed, subtly, twisting into a mother's soothing hum, all familiar, intimate sounds, expertly crafted to exploit empathy and weakness. The tunnels began to branch, a dizzying labyrinth in the absolute dark. The sounds seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, a constant shifting chorus of agony and longing. The mimic was growing bolder, more complex in its deception. He found himself at a crossroads. From the left tunnel, he heard a woman's voice, soft and melodic, singing a lullaby a forgotten part of him faintly recognized. From the right, a harsh, desperate coughing, like a miner suffocating in a rock fall. The mimic was weaving a tapestry of personal torment. He chose neither, instead pressing himself against the rough-hewn rock wall. He closed his eyes, forcing his attention away from the deceptive sounds, focusing instead on the absence of other sounds, the subtle shifts in the air, the faint, unnatural chill, the almost imperceptible vibrations under his boots. The creature could copy sound, but could it copy the true silence that defined the rest of the mine's depths? A low rumble vibrated through the rock, followed by the sickening sound of timber cracking. The creature wasn't just sound, it was manipulating the mine itself. A cascade of rocks fell from the ceiling in a nearby tunnel, sending dust billowing. It was trying to bury him, to trap him, to add him to its screaming choir. He pushed forward, the air growing colder, the sounds more chaotic. The creature began to layer them. Screams, laughter, weeping, metallic scraping, all interwoven into a maddening symphony of terror. His own name, or what it sounded like, was whispered from the darkness, then shouted, then twisted into a gurgling plea. His sanity, a sturdy fortress forged in countless unnatural encounters, began to show cracks. The isolation was immense. He was alone with a predator that knew his deepest fears and used them as its weapon, a sound that could drive a man mad without ever laying a hand on him. He stumbled, his lantern swinging wildly, casting grotesque, fleeting shadows that seemed to take on monstrous forms. He tasted dust and the metallic tang of fear. He remembered a time when he nearly lost himself to a similar auditory terror, a siren of the plains that sang men to their doom. He fought to anchor himself, focusing on the cold steel of his revolver, the rough fabric of his duster, anything real. The weight of his own existence against the unreality of the sounds. The riders were pushed against the overwhelming noise. A silent challenge in the suffocating dark, he would not yield to a coward's echo. The response was a terrifying cacophony, a chorus of screams, then a guttural growl that reverberated through the rock. The distortion in the air grew stronger, a shimmering mass of absolute blackness that seemed to absorb all light, edged with faint, shifting forms that could be feathers. It was the source of the sounds, a being of pure auditory malice, given a fragile, ethereal form. It lunged, not with a physical impact, but with a wave of sound that slammed into him like a physical blow. The screams were deafening, the voices agonizing, attacking his very mind. He fired, the report of the revolver a thunderclap in the confined space, momentarily overpowering the creature's assault. The bullets tore through the shimmering distortion, and for a fleeting moment, a high-pitched, unearthly shriek, not a mimicry, but its true alien voice, tore through the air. The creature recoiled, its form wavering. The rider knew it wasn't a physical beast to be simply shot. It was bound to the sound, to the very acoustics of the mine, perhaps even an entity of the sound. Its weakness, its strength was its mimicry. He needed to break its song. He emptied his revolver into the support timbers around the creature's wavering mass. Wood splintered, metal shrieked, the ceiling groaned. He pulled out a stick of dynamite from his satchel, his movements precise despite the shaking in his limbs. This was a gamble, a desperate final play. The creature seemed to sense his intent, its mimicry growing frantic, trying to scream him into submission, to lure him into another rockfall, to bury him alive before he could act. With a final desperate resolve, he lit the fuse and hurled the dynamite towards the creature's shifting presence, aiming for the unstable rock ceiling above it. The explosion was deafening, a roar that obliterated all other sound. The mine shuddered, groaning like a dying beast. Rocks rained down, timber splintered, and the tunnel itself seemed to collapse in on itself. Dust and debris filled the air, blinding and choking him. The rider threw himself to the ground, shielding his head, the concussive force of the blast rattling his teeth. When the echoes of the explosion finally died, an unnatural silence fell. The constant moaning was gone. The horrifying chorus of stolen voices was gone. The only sounds were the slow drip of water, the settling of dust and of water's own ragged breathing. He pushed himself up, every muscle screaming in protest. His head throbbed. Dust covered him like a shroud. He scanned the cavern where the creature had been. The tunnel was a chaotic mess of shattered rock and splintered wood, a freshly carved tomb. There was no sign of the shimmering distortion, no lingering presence. He had broken its song. He had buried it. But the mine itself was different. The air was colder, still, and unnaturally quiet. The pervasive dread had not lifted. It had merely changed. The darkness was deeper somehow, a living entity that now permeated the very stone. He had survived, but the encounter had etched new scars onto his soul, deeper than any physical wound. The constant vigilance, the inability to trust sound, had taken its toll on his mind, twisting the edges of his own perceptions. He retraced his steps, finding his way back to the mine entrance. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bruised purples and blood oranges. Silas was gone, fled from the thunderous roar that must have shaken the entire settlement. The rider remounted his horse, He didn't look back at mine number 13. It was silent now, but it was a silence born of trauma, a deeper, more profound quiet than before. The earth had swallowed its secret whole, and the creature was gone, or perhaps merely quiescent, waiting for the next brave fool to disturb its tomb. The land around the mine was forever tainted, a place where sanity had shattered, a grim testament to the unspeakable. The rider rode on, a solitary figure against the vast indifferent sky. He carried the dust of that mine, and the echo of its screams, deep within him. Some battles leave a man changed, desecrated, worse than before. This was one of them, and he knew with a chilling certainty that the mine would whisper again one day. And perhaps when it did, its song would be even more potent, having learned from his own struggle. If this story left you chilled by the echoes of dread, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss one of the rider's grim tales. And tell me, if you heard the terrifying whispers of mine number 13 calling your name, would you answer its screams or try to silence the mountain forever? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching Cabin of Whispers. See you next time.